Welcome to the Defining Moments Black Men series of the Authentic Joe Show. I'm your host, Jolenajohnson, and it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome our guest today, Omar Marshall. How are you today, sir?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Before we even get started, I see that KC hat in your background.
Yes, ma'am. Here's another one though. 2023 Super Bowl, baby.
All right. Well, let's hope the Chiefs do it. Okay. So, besides being a fan of Kansas City, can you tell us a little about your self, your occupation, and your background?
My name is Omar Marshall. I was born in Kansas City. My occupation at the moment, I have a couple. I'm actually a flight attendant for United Airlines, and I'm also a musician. I'm the lead singer of a music group called the New Jersey Connection.
Okay. All right. And can you tell us how you would describe yourself?
Describe myself. I am a free-spirited person, a spiritual person more so than religious, with a foundation of a religious um, background that I grew up in, which is Islam.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And if you had to pick a phrase that would be the theme for your life, what would it be?
Pick a phrase for the theme of your life. There are no absolutes in life, and live life to the fullest.
There are no absolutes in life and live life to the fullest. That is
Absolutely.
fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That's something to really think about. Um, Oftentimes people will say, well, what is a defining moment? So, a defining moment is a point in life when a pivotal decision must be made or when an experience fundamentally changes a person. What defining moment would you be willing to share with us today?
I can think of a few. One of the first defining moments for me happened in college. You and I went to the same college. We went to the University of Missouri, Columbia, which is the main campus for the University of Missouri. And at the time, I was a student. I did work study in the football facility.
Okay.
And later on, I became the only African American equipment manager for the football team. So what that incorporated was I was also cleaning the locker and cleaning the locker room and doing the laundry, which was a part of my work study. And then I was also helping run practices, fix equipment, and things of that nature, as well as being a full-time student and then also working two jobs at the same time. So my plate was full. I don't think a lot of people at school knew that, but my
I
plate
had
was
no
full.
idea.
Yeah, my plate was full. So the first defining moment was going through all that, and you and I was uh, in the choirs and the black student unions and stuff like that. So I'm still trying to have fun and be a student as well, but I had to make my own way through college. So I was running myself thin.
Mhm.
I was double booking myself. I'm supposed to be at one event and another event at the same time or very close together. So, say
Mhm.
for instance, I might only have an hour in between events and I'm booking all these different events, but then because one could possibly run over, I'm running late for the next.
Yes.
So, in one particular incident during college, it was during football practice, and I was running late because I was either coming from class or coming from work. And the other equipment managers had gotten on me about always being late and or possibly leaving early to have to go wait tables at the Olive Garden, which I was working at. And this particular day, it got to me, and it stressed me out. And I came back to the equipment manager, and I was in tears actually. Um, and my head coach, or the head equipment manager, his name was Bob Stanley, set me on a stool in a chair and gave me some life lessons that changed my life. And that lesson was stop making excuses for yourself.
Mm.
Stop double booking yourself. If you say you're going to be somewhere, be there. Say, for instance, if you need to be somewhere at 10 a.m., then don't wait till 10:45 or 10:50 to start getting ready, trying to make yourself ready to be where you're supposed to be. Give yourself enough time to get ready and be where you're supposed to be. And his advice to me was I don't want to hear any excuses. And we as a people sometimes come up with a million excuses why we didn't do what we were supposed to do or be where we're supposed to be. And so it was hard to hear, but I had never had anyone sit me down and tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
And as I sat there listening to him, and I would say for me, it was a little strange because it was coming from someone that was not of my culture or
Mm-hmm.
my background or where I was coming from, but it was a message that needed to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And at that fundamentally changed how I looked at things, how I presented myself. If I say I'm going to do something, be there. He was like, I don't want to hear that your car broke down. I don't want to hear that you had a flat tire, or whatever the case may be. Stop making excuses and do what you say you're going to do. You know, so things do happen, and when things happen, you have to be able to communicate those with the people that you are in communication with.
Mm-hmm.
But stop making excuses, and
Wow.
that changed my life.
Wow. Well, yes. Back then we didn't have cell phones.
No,
So, okay. So what did you do differently as a result of that advice?
I stopped up double booking myself.
Mm-hmm.
um, I stopped making excuses for myself. I gave myself enough time to be where I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And say, for instance, if you have two events, an hour is not enough time in between whatever events that you have in order to make both. So what looks like enough time usually is not,
Mm-hmm.
unless you have hours in between.
Mm-hmm.
So 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours in between two commitments
Mm-hmm.
really isn't enough time to make those commitments. And
Mm-hmm.
then also stop double booking myself. So
Mm-hmm.
give myself enough time in between functions to take care of things that need to be taken care of. So that
Gotcha.
I'm not late, because being late is not good. It's not cool.
Right. People can't rely on you.
Time is money.
Absolutely. Okay. So, what else happened in college?
I'm sorry.
What else happened in college?
Oh, so the second event in college is, you might know this particular individual, Scott
Well,
Wheaton. Do you know Scott Wheaton?
I do. I know. Yes, I do.
Okay. So Scott Wheaton is a young man that I met in college, and one day a group of guys were in the dorm room and we're playing the dozens. And for us black people playing the dozens, you talk about somebody's mama, those are fighting words. Your mama this and your mama that.
Uh-huh.
Well, this one particular time, someone said, "Well, your daddy this and your daddy that," and Scott got visibly upset instantly.
Mhm.
And none of the brothers in the room could understand why he got upset. Scott, is just your daddy. What you mad for? It ain't your mama, you know. And Scott was like, "Don't talk about my dad." And so it almost came to blows. And so I didn't understand that until one day we had a school break, and Scott invited me back to St. Louis. I was from Kansas City. Scott was from
Mhm.
St. Louis,
Mhm.
and he invited me back to spend the weekend with his family. I can't remember exactly which um, holiday it was, but I called home, asked my mom. She's like, "Yeah, you can go. You can go hang out with them." And so I told him I could go. So the day comes where Scott's father comes to pick us up to take us back to St. Louis to hang out for the weekend. And Scott's father walked in the dorm. Scott walked over, gave him a hug, and his father kissed him on the cheek. I had never seen that before in my life. Dealing with my relationship with my father, and how we interacted. There was very little emotions between me and my father. He was just a figure that either provided or gave discipline. There
Mhm.
was no, there wasn't any care. I don't say there wasn't any care. It was just different. That was the first time I actually seen visual and
Mhm.
physical love and affection between a father and a son and man to man. It blew my mind. It really did. And it also explained to me in that instant why Scott got upset,
Yes.
because of the relationship that he had with his father. I have held on to that visual and that experience from that day forward, to the fact that I even worked subconsciously or quietly to try to get my father to be a little bit more loving, a little bit more engaging, a little bit more affectionate. It didn't work. But that experience changed my perception of the dynamics of father and son relationships and man to man relationships. And it was conscious altering for me. And later on in life, me and Scott lost contact, and we established ourselves back on Facebook. And I have told him this story twice,
Mm-hmm.
how much that affected me. To
It's
this day, it still affects me.
that is wonderful. It's interesting because I asked Scott to be part of this series and I haven't heard back from him.
Okay.
So we'll see if he steps up. I think that is fantastic. You know, if we don't learn how to be affectionate, if we don't learn how to be intimate, if we don't learn how to be loving in our homes, it
Hmm.
often affects the way we're able to do that when we grow up. And I know I heard from my father how his dad was, you know, he was in World War II. He was in the army, and you know, he was a soldier, and then he came and, you know, raised his kids, and you know, he ran his house like a, you know, he was in the army.
Right.
And so he said, the first time I saw him holding you and your cousin, we're like, I'm 2 months older than her. So there's this picture of my grandpa, and he has one of us in this hand and one of us in this hand. And he has this huge smile. And he was like, as soon as you girls came around, he just softened. It was like it wasn't the same father. And he said there's something about grandfatherhood, I guess, but you could tell he felt a little away because
Hmm.
so I think this is a very good observation, and I'm glad you shared that because hopefully young men and older men alike can hear what you said and maybe take some steps to change their approach.
Well, I don't think you're ever too old to change.
Hmm.
You have to intentionally want to change.
Yes.
And I think when you see that your actions are actually hurting someone, whether it's your children, your wife, your family, you have to then take a look in the mirror to then ask yourself the question, is there something that I can do to rectify the situation?
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
so
Okay.
we all have our baggage, but as you become an adult, it's then your responsibility to then fix those problems.
Absolutely. Okay, so um you mentioned about your time management issue and how you began to resolve that, and you also mentioned that one of your careers is being a flight attendant. So
Yes.
obviously you have perfected the ability
Yes, because they
to
don't play about time management.
to get to where you're supposed to be on time, and I know that can be
Exactly.
stressful. So can you tell us how how did you even get into being a flight attendant, and can you just tell us, you know, because that obviously has something to do with how you changed your approach.
Yeah, so now I have to back up just a little bit because, as I said, I was an equipment manager in college. I also, uh, with college, when we had away games that I didn't go to, I then asked to be a volunteer equipment manager for the Kansas City Chiefs football team.
Mm.
And reluctantly, a letter was written to the head equipment manager at that time that then allowed me to come in and volunteer. So when the team went on away games at Mizzou, I would get in my car and then drive back to Kansas City and then start volunteering. So this happened around 89, 90.
Okay.
And then
Okay, excuse
I,
me. I hate to
mhm,
interrupt. Why do you say reluctantly was written?
um, because as in college, I was the only black equipment manager. And then
Hmm.
also at the Chiefs at the time, I was the only black equipment manager. So the same opportunities that were happening with my Caucasian counterparts in
Hmm.
college was not necessarily being afforded to me.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so I had to insist that they write the letter to them. And then it was a very vague letter. It was nothing that was necessarily glowing to say, hire Omar.
Hmm.
It was very vague. And then it took me to then meet Mike Davidson, who was the head equipment manager at the time, and then make that connection with him. I think I drove home to meet with him, and then he went ahead and hired me as a volunteer equipment manager for the Chiefs. So I did that from like 89 up until 94 when I left to become a flight attendant.
Wow. Okay.
So During that time, I was a volunteer um, equipment manager for the Chiefs. I was waiting tables at night at the Olive Garden again, other restaurants throughout Kansas City, because once again, money was an issue.
Yes.
When I was in college, the other equipment managers' fathers were wealthy or well-to-do. Vice provost of another college, or one guy's father owned a construction company, and another guy's father was a vice president at Nike. And here I come in from the inner city of Kansas City,
Mm-hmm.
needing all the money that I can get. So I'm working 2 and 3 jobs at a time plus doing that. So that didn't necessarily change when I went home and
Okay.
was working for the Chiefs. So once I actually left college in 92, I moved back home to Kansas City and then started doing it full time for the Chiefs.
Okay.
So during that time, or during my college years, I also became friends with different um, sports figures because that's what I did as equipment manager. I ate at the dining hall table with them. I saw them every day at practice, and then also the baseball players and basketball players. I became really, really, really good friends with Anthony Peeler,
Oh,
who
yes.
was on the basketball team, who then went on to play pro.
Mm-hmm.
So we would all hang out whenever he played for the Lakers at the time. So then he would come home to Kansas City, and we would just hang out. So in one of these times, there was a girl there who asked me what I did. I said, "Well, I'm a equipment manager for Kansas City Chief, and I wait tables at night." And she's like, "Oh, well, you'll make a great flight attendant. I work for Southwest Airlines. I'm a single mom. I live in Kansas City, but I'm based in Phoenix. I make about $45,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
and I only work weekends." So she said, "Hey, look, just here's my information. Call me, and I'll help you fill it out, and I'll walk it in." So part of me is like, "Oh, she BSing me.
Mm-hmm.
But then another part of me is like, let me try to check this out. And so after that incident, I was hanging out with a guy named Martin Bayless, who I worked for 19 years in his football camp. So I was his main assistant. And
Okay.
Marcus Allen at the time, we were actually going to hang out. And I ran it past them to say, "Hey, look, I met this girl that gave me this information about being a flight attendant, blah, 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 blah." I never even thought about being a flight attendant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the back seat and they in the front seat. They both was like, "Yo, Omar, take the opportunity. This will allow you to get out of Kansas City and see the world. And you can always come home whenever you want." And based on that advice, I called her back. And this was about 1993.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember plain as day. It was 4th of July weekend, hanging out with Anthony again. Everybody's outside popping fireworks and having a good time. And I'm in there filling out an application.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, "Ah, you ain't going nowhere. Why are you in there filling out that application? Blah, 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 blah." But I did, you know, and I filled it out, gave it to her. And flew me out to Chicago a couple of times. I made 2 rounds of interviews. The first one, what we called a cattle call, when back then we
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of people come together in one shot, and they pick from that who they want to progress to the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I progressed to the second round, and once again, I was the only black male candidate. And my naivete, I thought I had it in the bag. Well, I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't get hired. And at that time, I guess my mother knew about it, and she told one of her coworkers at the post office about it. And he happened to know, excuse me, know somebody who was on the hiring committee for Continental Airlines at the time. And at that time in '93, they was on a hiring freeze. So it was like, "Hey, look, if anything changes, I'll let you know." Then the summer of 1994, he calls my friend Dwayne back and says, "Hey, look, we're hiring. We're coming to Kansas City for a road show. Have him come up here." And that's how I got hired.
That is fantastic. So you've been in the industry almost 20 years.
No, more than that, 28.
28. Oh, yes. Because, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Yes,
28.
that's right. Oh, Omar, that is so exciting. My first job out of Mizzou was working in reservations for TWA. So
Oh,
I
wow.
yeah, and so it costs $10 to fly anywhere, and that's actually how I ended up moving out to LA because it cost me $10. And I
Oh,
went
wow.
out to visit friends. I went out to visit Chris and Steve, and had a great time. And then I played Route 66 in my Ford Pinto Pony cassette every day for 3 months until I made it out there. That is so wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing these defining moments, for being so thoughtful. And I think you've given a lot of people some things to think about. Um, You know, I really admire the work you've done, and your performance in your band is fantastic as well. So I'm
Oh,
definitely a
thank you,
fan.
thank you.
Yes, and I really enjoy looking at all of your pictures from around the world. So thank you for taking that chance and making that choice and being intentional and living this life. And I'm hoping that when people see this, maybe they'll be able to go back and say, yes, the Kansas City Chiefs are the Super Bowl champions for 2023.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yes, this is for my young brothers out there, and that is to live your life with intention.
Mhm.
You know, set goals. I personally set different goals. I have short-term goal, a medium term goal, and then a long-term goal. And one of the things that the long-term goal allows you to do is set into place a plan to make it to where you're trying to get to.
Mhm.
So set those out at least a year in advance to say, okay, by 2024, this is the goal or plan that I would like to do, or where I want to be. Then what steps can I take to then get there? You
Very good.
know, um, and trust your instincts. You
Mhm.
know, your instincts are there for a reason. I've learned to trust my instincts. You know, when your mind and your heart is telling you something, believe it. You know, well, I'm gonna say your heart because your mind sometimes tries to overtake and overthink, and that's not
Mhm.
necessarily the case.
Mhm.
And travel and see the world. You know,
Yes.
traveling gives you a life experience and education that you can't get out of a book. You know, and learn how to interact in different environments because how you were raised is your foundation, but you need to be able to sometimes turn that on and turn that off and know the crowd and the room that you're in,
Mhm.
you know, and when to use it. And
Mhm.
another thing I like to impart that language is a powerful tool. You can change somebody's life with one word, you know, so be careful about what you say and what you speak into
Mhm.
events, into existence, you know, because if you can think it and then you can speak it, you can create it.
Absolutely. Oh, that is profound. Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
this interview and for what you said. I really appreciate it.
Oh, and also check out my music.
Yes. Oh, yes. We'll put the link in the bio information.
All
Okay.
right.
All right. Thank you.